Mark Morrison never imagined his son's favorite teacher would be the one to destroy him until the night. Jake, trembling in his bedroom, whispered the unthinkable. Mrs. Shaw is hurting me. Now, with the school protecting her and the town turning against them, a father's rage is about to rewrite the rules of justice. The small, tight-knit town of Millfield was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the sort of community where people left their doors unlocked, and children played outside until the streetlights flickered on. Parents trusted their neighbors, their schools, and most of all, their teachers. And no teacher was more trusted than Mrs. Rebecca Shaw. At 32, Rebecca was the epitome of warmth and dedication. She had been teaching English at Millfield Middle School for 3 years, and in that time, she had built a reputation as the kind of educator who went above and beyond. She stayed late to help struggling students, organize book drives, and even chaperoned field trips with an infectious enthusiasm. Parents adored her, students looked up to her, and the school administration considered her one of their brightest assets. Jake Morrison was one of those students who thrived under Rebecca's attention, a quiet but bright 12-year-old with a mop of sandy blonde hair. He had always been a good student, but in Rebecca's class, he seemed to shine even brighter. She praised his essays in front of the whole class, recommended advanced books for him, and even let him help grade quizzes after school. At first, Jake's parents, Mark and Lisa, were grateful. Their son had always been a little shy, and seeing him come out of his shell under Rebecca's guidance made them believe she was the kind of teacher every child deserved. But then, the dynamic shifted. Rebecca started texting Jake outside of school hours, innocent messages at first, asking how his weekend was or if he needed help with homework. Then they became more frequent, more personal. She called him special and mature for his age. Jake, flattered by the attention, didn't think much of it. Neither did his parents until the messages grew stranger. Rebecca began asking Jake to keep their conversations a secret, telling him it was their little game. Around the same time, Jake's behavior started changing. He became withdrawn, snapping at his younger sister over small things. He stopped eating dinner with the family, retreating to his room as soon as he got home. His grades, once impeccable, began slipping. When Lisa asked him what was wrong, he just shrugged and muttered that school was stupid. Mark, a former Marine with a sharp eye for details, noticed something deeper was wrong. He saw the way Jake flinched when someone touched him unexpectedly, the way he hesitated before getting into the car for school each morning. One night, after Jake had been unusually quiet for weeks, Mark knocked on his bedroom door. When there was no answer, he pushed it open gently and found Jake curled up on his bed, his face streaked with tears. The boy tried to wipe them away quickly, but it was too late. Mark sat beside him, his voice low but firm. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." For a long moment, Jake just shook his head, his breath hitching. Then, in a voice so small it barely carried across the room, he whispered the words that would shatter Mark's world. "Mrs. Shaw is hurting me." The confession spilled out in fragments how Rebecca had started touching him in ways that made him feel sick, how she made him promise never to tell, how she said no one would believe him if he did. Mark's hands clenched into fists, his mind racing between rage and disbelief. This couldn't be happening, not in their town, not to his son. But one look at Jake's hollow eyes told him it was all true. And in that moment, Mark Morrison knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Mark Morrison sat frozen on the edge of his son's bed, Jake's words echoing in his skull like a gunshot in an empty room. His military training had prepared him for combat, for loss, for chaos, but nothing could brace a father for this. The air between them felt charged, suffocating. He wanted to scream, to punch through the wall, to drive straight to that woman's house, but Jake was shaking. Mark forced himself to exhale, unclenching his jaw. His voice came out rough but controlled. "Show me." Jake hesitated, then unlocked his phone with trembling fingers. The screen illuminated texts that made Mark's stomach twist emojis from Rebecca, a winking face next to "can't wait for our special study session tomorrow," followed by "remember, this is just between us." Further up, a photo notification made Mark's blood run cold. Jake hadn't opened it yet. With a nod from his son, he tapped it. The image loaded slowly. Rebecca in her classroom after hours, wearing a tight blouse unbuttoned one too many, her lips puckered in a kiss. The caption read, "Wish you were here." Mark's vision tunneled. This wasn't just inappropriate, this was calculated. He scrolled up, finding more. Requests to delete messages, reminders to keep our little secrets. And worst of all, Jake's timid responses clearly groomed into compliance. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her smile dying at the sight of their faces. When Mark showed her the phone, she made us sound like a wounded animal. "We're calling the police." No, the station was only 10 minutes away, but the drive felt endless. Jake sat in the back seat, face pressed to the window, silent. The fluorescent lights of the precinct glared as Officer Dern, a weary man with coffee stains on his shirt, took their statement. His pen paused when Jake described the storage closet where Rebecca had first touched him. Then came the questions. "Did anyone see this happen?" Dern asked. Jake shook his head. "Any physical evidence?" Mark shoved the phone forward. "You're looking at it." Dern skimmed the texts, his expression unreadable. "I'll need to make copies. But, ... A heavy pause. "You should know these cases are complicated, especially with a female perpetrator." Mark's knuckles whitened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Dern held up a hand. "I'm just saying, the DA might hesitate. No jury expects a pretty school teacher to." Lisa slammed her palm on the desk. "Our son is 12. The officer backed off, promising a detective would follow up. But as they left, Mark caught the whispers of dispatcha muttering, "That Shaw woman. No way." And another cop laughing darkly. "Kid probably has a crush." By morning, the texts had been forwarded to Child Protective Services. But Rebecca still stood in front of her class, smiling as if nothing had happened. The principal, a balding man who'd coached Jake in Little League, called it a misunderstanding and refused to suspend her without concrete proof. Meanwhile, Jake's friends stopped sitting with him at lunch. Parents at the grocery store pulled their kids closer when the Morrisons walked by. The rumor mill had already spun its verdict. Jake was a liar, a troubled boy seeking attention. Mark watched his son shrink into himself, and something inside him snapped. If the system wouldn't act, he would. The days after Jake's disclosure crawled by in a haze of frustration and helplessness. Mark sat through endless meetings with detectives who spoke in slow, measured tones about due process and building a case, while Rebecca Shaw remained free, still teaching, still surrounded by children. The school district's lawyer had even suggested Jake might have misinterpreted Rebecca's affection, a comment that made Mark's hands shake with barely contained fury. Late one night, after Lisa and Jake had gone to bed, Mark sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, the blue glow of the screen casting shadows across his face. He typed Rebecca's name into the search bar, adding keywords like prior complaints and teaching history. At first, nothing alarming surfaced, just her LinkedIn profile and a few old articles about school events. But then, digging deeper into archived school board minutes from neighboring towns, he found something that made his pulse spike. Rebecca had worked at 2 other schools before, Millfield one in Hartfield, and another in Brayton. Both stints lasted barely a year before she resigned for personal reasons. Too many coincidences. Mark's instincts screamed that this was a pattern. He spent hours scouring local Facebook groups, finally stumbling upon a buried comment from a Hartfield parent. "That English teacher gave my daughter creepy vibes. Always texting her, calling her mature for her age. We switched schools, no police report, no investigation, just another whispered suspicion that had slipped through the cracks." Mark's research grew obsessive. He drove to Hartfield on his day off, posing as a parent considering a move to the district. A secretary at the school, an older woman with tired eyes, recognized Rebecca's name immediately. "Oh, her," she muttered, lowering her voice. "Lots of drama there. Always had a favorite student." When Mark pressed, she clammed up, but her unease was confirmation enough. Then, the breakthrough. While scrolling through Rebecca's public Instagram filled with sunset hikes and classroom selfies, he noticed a tagged photo from months ago. A group of students at a bowling alley, Rebecca in the center, her arm draped around a girl who looked barely. The caption read, "Best field trip ever with my favorite people." But it was the girl's expression that made Mark's stomach lurch, the same forced smile Jake had worn before he broke down. Emily Rivas, a quick search, led him to her Facebook profile, where her mother had recently posted, "Emily's been so moody lately. School stress?" Mark's blood ran cold. Rebecca wasn't just a predator, she was a repeat offender, skating from town to town because no one had stopped her. And now, she had a new target. He printed everything, the texts, the photos, the timelines, and stormed into the police station the next morning, slamming the folder onto the same detective's desk. "You missed this?" he growled. The detective flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. Finally, he exhaled, "I'll make some calls." But as Mark walked out, He knew time was running out. Every day Rebecca spent in that classroom was another day she could manipulate, another child she could hurt, and if the system failed again, he wouldn't. The waiting was unbearable. Days passed with no word from the police, no sign of movement in the case. Meanwhile, Rebecca Shaw continued her routine, smiling at students in the hallway, posting inspirational quotes on her classroom door, living her life as if she hadn't shattered Jake's. Mark watched from a distance, his frustration boiling into something darker, something desperate. Then, the final straw. A news alert popped up on Mark's phone, another school district scandal, this one about a teacher in a nearby town arrested for misconduct. The comment section was flooded with outrage, demands for justice. But beneath the fury, one reply stood out. Asterisk, this keeps happening because no one does anything until it's too late. Asterisk, something inside, Mark snapped. He drove to the school just as the final bell rang, watching from his truck as students flooded the parking lot. And there she was, Rebecca, laughing with a group of girls, her hand resting on one girl's shoulder in a way that made Mark's skin crawl. Emily, the girl from the bowling photo. Mark's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had planned to wait for the police, to trust the system one last time. But seeing her there, still playing the beloved teacher, still touching kids like she had every right, it was too much. He followed her car at a distance, his pulse hammering. She didn't go home. Instead, she pulled into the nearly empty lot of a park on the outskirts of town. A quiet place, secluded. Mark parked several spaces away, watching as Rebecca sat on a bench and pulled out her phone, waiting for someone. Then Emily stepped out of the trees, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Mark moved before he could second-guess himself. He crossed the lot in long strides, his shadow stretching ahead of him. Rebecca looked up just as he reached them, her smile freezing into something startled, then fearful. "You," Mark said, his voice low and rough. "You don't get to do this again." Emily's eyes widened. "Mr. Morrison?" Rebecca stood quickly, her phone clattering to the ground. "Mark, you need to leave. You're scaring her." "Funny, I think that's your job." He turned to Emily, forcing his voice softer. "Go home now." The girl hesitated, glancing between them, then bolted. Rebecca tried to follow, but Mark blocked her path. "It's over," he said. I know about Branton, and now so do the police." Her face paled. "You have no proof. I have enough." He pulled out his own phone, thumb hovering over the record button. "Tell me the truth, right now." For a second, she looked like she might run. Then, to his shock, her shoulders slumped. It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. Mark's breath caught. That was all he needed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the cops, maybe a passerby, maybe Emily. It didn't matter, because as the first cruiser skidded into the lot, Rebecca Shaw finally looked like what she was. A predator who'd run out of places to hide. The arrest made headlines, but not in the way Mark expected. Local news outlets ran with sanitized versions, teacher suspended amid investigation. School district reviews policies. No perp walk footage, no mugshots splashed across the screen, just vague statements about serious allegations that painted Rebecca as a temporary problem rather than a monster. Then the victim blaming started. Online forums lit up with anonymous comments. What was the kid doing to encourage her? And a 12-year-old boy with a hot teacher, lucky him. Even some parents at Jake's school muttered that he must have exaggerated what happened. The worst was when Rebecca's lawyer gave a press conference, calling her a dedicated educator caught in a misguided witch hunt. But Mark had the recording. That night in the park, when Rebecca had admitted it wasn't supposed to go this far, her voice trembling, her eyes darting like a cornered animal, Mark had captured every damning second. He uploaded it to a victims' rights website before the police could confiscate his phone as evidence. Within hours, it went viral. Suddenly, the tone shifted. Reporters dug deeper, uncovering Rebecca's history of abruptly leaving schools. A Branton parent came forward with texts nearly identical to Jake's. Then Emily's family filed a restraining order, confirming she'd been groomed too. The district superintendent resigned amid outrage over the delayed response. At the trial, Jake testified via closed-circuit TV, his voice steady as he described the storage closet where Rebecca first assaulted him. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict. When the judge sentenced Rebecca to 15 years, the courtroom erupted not in cheers, but in muffled sobs from parents realizing how close she'd been to their own children. Yet for Mark, Closure remained elusive. Jake still woke up screaming some nights. Lisa had started therapy for panic attacks. Their family had become a cautionary tale, their privacy obliterated. And Rebecca? She'd served maybe 10 years with good behavior. 10 years for destroying multiple childhoods. So Mark channeled his rage differently now. He testified before the state legislature, demanding stricter background checks for teachers. He partnered with a survivors network to lobby for laws recognizing female predators as equal threats. And when parents from other towns reached out with similar stories, he showed them how to fight. One evening, as he sorted through another box of legal documents, Jake appeared in the doorway. "You okay, Dad?" Mark looked at his son, really looked. The shadows under his eyes had lightened. He'd started playing baseball again. Small victories. "We're getting there," Mark said, because the truth was, justice hadn't healed them. Time wouldn't either. But the fight to make sure no other kids suffered in silence, that kept them moving forward.